Hello, everyone. I am here to talk about Miley Cyrus's eighth full-length studio album. It's her 10th project if you count her two EPs that she's put out, The Time of Our Lives and She Is Coming. But full-length albums, this is her eighth, coming 2 years after Endless Summer Vacation, an album that I did not review on my channel that year. And instead, I sort of did a tier ranking video of every Miley Cyrus song up to that date instead. And there's a reason why I didn't review it, because to be completely honest with you, I didn't really feel like I had that much to say about it. I feel like Endless Summer Vacation was a very milquetoast kind of record for Miley. It didn't really feel like she was expanding her boundaries or creative palette in many ways. It was kind of a by-the-numbers pop record with probably one of the more banal and bland pop tracks that ever hit huge on the radio for Miley in Flowers. I was always very puzzled as to the success of that song, the runaway success of it. I do feel like often very mediocre songs end up just skyrocketing to a level that's kind of frustrating when, there are big singles that deserved that success. Think of Shape of You by Ed Sheeran, for example. I am not an Ed Sheeran hater by any means. He has some great songs, even some good singles. But Shape of You being so huge was just so unnecessary. And I feel Flowers, we had Jaded. Jaded was right there, but for some reason, the momentum just never got off for it. And RIP to River, right? We were hoping River was going to be a thing. That never happened either. But then Miley at one point we thought she was going to be sort of doing an Endless Summer Vacation Volume 2. She put out a song at the end of August of 2023 called Used to Be Young, which I will admit now sort of lives in this weird sort of liminal space now that we've gotten this new era. It's sort of like, I think at the time when Miley put out that song, she was thinking that Endless Summer Vacation Volume 2 was going to happen, a lot like the continuation of the She Is Coming saga. A lot of, fans were upset that that never materialized. Well, once again, ESV, we closed that door. By the end of that year, it felt like Miley had changed plans and must have started to decide to work on something with a little more tooth to it, a little more experimental, a little more robust. And I am so glad that she did, because we have Something Beautiful here, which came out on May 30th of this year, and it is an absolute triumph of a record. Now, I will say, when we first got the lead single, the title track, Something Beautiful, a couple months ago, which also did come with the 2-minute prelude, which is the intro with the spoken word and then the instrumental to lead us into the record. When we got those two tracks, I will say I was a little nervous that this album was not going to be for me. Something Beautiful, the title track, is an extremely experimental psychedelic rock track. It's pop and R&B in the verses, and it explodes into this electro-clash psychedelia. When Miley talked about this record at the beginning, she was teasing it as being her version of Pink Floyd's The Wall. And she was talking a lot about how she wanted it to be this extravagant, experimental magnum opus. And so immediately I was thinking, okay, we're going back in the rock direction, something we went into with Plastic Hearts. Which, I loved that record. For the fact that it was a little more alternative and like rock sounding, I really got into it as a pop girl. I was still like, there's this beautiful blend of pop and rock here that I'm really here for. We abandoned that for, Endless Summer Vacation, but now we bring that back with this new song. But I'm thinking, the melody's not really doing it for me. But I also recognized that I felt like this was possibly going to be a song that didn't need to hit sonically in the way I'm used to a pop song hitting. And thankfully, when we got the second single, End of the World, track number 3, my fears were assuaged, in that I could realize and take a deep breath that, like, okay, Miley has not abandoned, traditional time signatured pop music. End of the World is this brilliant disco-tinged pop record. Very throwback, very 70s, absolutely in love with the keyboard and just the explosive nature of it, the cathartic nature of it. And so those two songs, the dichotomy between them, when for a while they were the only songs we had so far on this record, I was like, okay, actually, I have no idea what we're getting here. The album cover is very glam. And so I was thinking glam rock. She's wearing vintage Thierry Mugler in a bodysuit. And it's so funny. I really kind of can't stop thinking about the sort of silhouette and how it sort of makes her look a little like an alien. And I keep thinking of Roger from American Dad. And, you know, Roger's this like fabulous character who constantly dresses up. And so I just keep seeing Roger as this this Mook-Laird Roger on the cover. I don't know if anyone else has spotted that, but it's just something I can't get out of my head. You know, I'm gonna be honest, the harsh silhouetting of it, as someone who, I don't want to say I'm like dabbled into photography, but maybe it's just like not big. I'm not big on this backlit kind of thing with photography. It's, you know, maybe not the best look for her. I've grown to like the image. I just was a little put off from it at first. I felt like it sort of spotlights the jewelry and the jeweled nature of the piece, but not quite to the level that I feel like in other lighting situations maybe it could have been. I understand that the adornments needed to pop, and so against her skin to blacken, you know, to cast her in shadow, it was an interesting choice. But I don't know. It's got a very musical theater spotlight kind of look, and I do feel like this album is very much a, you know, extravagant, you know, main stage kind of record. And so I feel like it does fit the, you know, kind of David Bowie, wild abandon, Elton John-esque, you know, kind of flair that this record is imbued with. And of course, the visuals are going to be very interesting here because we do have a couple music videos, but we also have an actual film that is going to be, I guess, the visual album companion to this record, which I believe, as of filming this, just premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York, and is going to be playing for, I believe, only one night only on June 12th in the United States in theaters, and I believe on June 27th in theaters internationally. Now, I don't think it's going to stay in theaters after that. I think it's going to eventually come to either a streaming service or maybe to YouTube. I'm not entirely sure what Miley's distribution deal is for this film. But it is like kind of credited as a film. It's not just, you know, a set of music videos. And so I'll be curious to see if there's a lot more narrative structure, if there's any dialogue in between. We definitely have a beginning in the prelude that is very cinematic in its kind of setting. Like when following an image from a train, your eyes can't keep the passing landscapes from being swallowed into endless distance. Like when holding a fistful of ashes, your hands can't save the things that have already been dissolved into air. Like when facing the sun through a window, your skin feels warmth, but it can't be in the world that its warmth has made alive. Like walking alone through a lucid dream, like saying your name aloud in an empty room, like witnessing my body standing in a mirror, aching to be seen, aching to become real. But the beauty one finds alone is a prayer that longs to be shared. I'm getting first-year poetry student in college here, and I love it. I feel like, you know, Miley getting into her poetry bag, you know, I'm here for it. It definitely reads like something I would have written in my, you know, undergrad poet creative writing class in college. So we've got all these contradictions here that we're setting up, you know, about the passing of time, symbolized by landscapes moving, grain falling through the hands, understanding what it is to be human, appreciating solitude, finding confidence in, you know, yourself. These are all things that are imbued into where she's heading with this prelude. And so it's a mantra-like poem that sets the stage for a very revelatory sort of exercise in self-confidence from Miley on this record. There's this huge sweeping cinematic orchestral moment at the end. It reminds me a little bit of what Florence and the Machine did on How Big, How Blue, How Beautiful. And the closing track actually has a little bit of Florence and the Machine-esque instrumental as well. So we'll get to that again. On Something Beautiful, she sings about, you know, in the pre-chorus, send home the guards and lay down your arms, the great golden bomb, flash, bang, and spark. Tell me something beautiful tonight. Boy, I'm losing my breath. You're marking up my necklace. I'm losing my breath. I'm undressing. I'm confessing that I'm so obsessed. When I'm in your palm, I'm like a pearl. So, alluding to being completely surrendering to the divinity of someone else's love that they're giving you in a very steamy session of abandon. And, there's an existential kind of nature to it that's not just tied to the physical body. This album is, I think, definitely working on both levels, the physical and metaphysical. But it's definitely channeling the Dead Pets record. I do think that, some of those Flaming Lips collaborations she did in the past, this is in conversation with it, which, wasn't always really my cup of tea. I don't necessarily come back to a lot of those songs. There are some good ones on Dead Pets, but I will say that, I respect, especially on an album where most of the other songs don't sound like this, I respect the experimentation. On End of the World, which again is peppy, even though it's about bleak subject matter, it's, one of those more kind of like post-apocalyptic genre of pop music where we're singing about the end of the world, but it's got this revelatory, celebratory feel. Apparently, the song was inspired by Miley's mom going on vacation without her, which was sort of an unprecedented thing. They always have been so close and they always go on these trips together. And so it felt like the end of the world for a brief moment. I know that there's been some tumultuous, gossipy kind of stuff going on with the Cyrus family, okay? Like Miley's mother and of course Billy Ray had this huge falling out, and it's just, Billy's getting remarried, and I don't know the tea, but like, I know that there's mess. There's a lot of mess. And so at one point people weren't sure if Miley was actually in communication with her mom anymore. They've apparently very much never were in that rocky situation, or they have definitely mended fences by now. Miley made a post about it actually to address the rumors. And so apparently that was what birthed this type of song. But if you don't know that backing, it just definitely reads like, why bother saving money when we can live today? The world is feeling so apocalyptic right now. And so, I mean, how fitting to just sort of celebrate what we can and make the most of today. I mean, that's something that is always going to hold true. And I love how we then seeg into More to Lose, which I feel like has very much an after the storm, an aftermath feel. The way that we sort of very sparse piano chords in this sort of ambient kind of like static environment that feels very much like, we're in the aftermath of the storm. And this is a bearing it all ballad from her that is so heart-wrenching to me. The melody is instantly grabbing. I've heard some people say it feels a little safe and by the numbers for Miley. I don't know where they're getting that. I feel like even though Miley is very, very competent with these piano ballads, we've gotten so many from her, so many amazing ones over the years. Angels Like You, The Climb, Wrecking Ball. This carries along that legacy, but just elevates it even more. And there's a key change towards the end, which I just find just absolutely marvelous. I stay when the ecstasy is far away, and I pray that it's coming round again. And you say it, and I wish it wasn't true. I knew someday that one would have to choose. I just thought we had more to lose. The moment a relationship is at an end, and you're realizing that the other partner is just not committed like you thought they were to making this work. You've put in so much time and effort because to you, there is so much to lose here. This is something you cherish, but you realize on their end that that's not really been the case. They can move on so much quicker. And you're left thinking, what was this even to you? And it's just this extremely melancholic burst of emotion that just displays wonderfully to fit Miley's really rich and soulful vocal. Now we have two interludes, and unlike certain Miss Addison Rae, who I'm going to be talking about later this week, I appreciate that Miley did not catfish us by calling them anything other than Interlude 1 and Interlude 2. So we knew that we were not actually getting 13 new songs on this record. We were actually really only getting 10 because the prelude is also technically like kind of short and not really a song. And I'll say this, the interludes are a little interestingly placed for me. I'm not entirely sure why she decided to frame the next song, Easy Lover, which apparently is the third single of this record. I'm not entirely sure why she chose to, put the two interludes to sandwich just one song. If I were, making a record, I would, spread it out, put maybe interlude 2 between maybe tracks 10 and 11 or 11 and 12, maybe even 12 and 13. I mean, it's just a very strange, particularly for interlude 2's location. I'm a little curious about what the thought process was there. But we have sandwiched in there a nugget of funk pop that is absolutely fabulous, something I could definitely see Miley, tearing up on stage in Easy Lover. It's a little bit much in the production sometimes. I feel like we lose a little bit of that bass and that funk that I want a little more pronounced with some of the, the overlaying of that production. But it's just an absolute groove. I will say it probably could have fit on Endless Summer Vacation. It's definitely a little more in conversation with tracks like Flowers, but I think this is a more elevated form of disco funk pop for Miley, of throwback pop music that, I think should do very well on radio. I could see this song being big, although I'm not entirely sure if Miley is going to get another hit like Flowers, possibly ever again in her career. That was such a, out of left field moment for her. Doesn't always strike twice. I'm not sure if this record at all, if she was thinking commercial, appeal. I think she was definitely making this record for her rather than what it felt a little bit like with Endless Summer Vacation, making a record for the label. Golden Burning Sun is just a slightly more muted version to me of More to Lose. We've got that aftermath kind of sparseness coming in before the guitars really pick up. And we have this like mid-tempo ballad. I appreciate, the melody for, again, the emotion that comes out, but it's just not hitting quite as hard. You're the only one under the golden burning sun. Can I have you if I never let you down? There's so much optimism about something going in a direction you can only dream of with someone. I know those jittery feelings, but you second guess it because you know how things have gone in the past and you just doubt that the universe is going to you're not going to get everything that you want. And those early days in a relationship, you have to be very careful with those expectations, but you still get caught up in the dream. So track number 9 was, I think, when my ears were busted wide open. I was not expecting, I was expecting this record to maybe have some country tinged, power ballads, some maybe like ESV sounding funk throwback pop songs with a little bit of that 80s sensibility coming in with the choruses and stuff. I was expecting that, but what I was not expecting was very much electrifying synth pop rave dance music. Miley used to be in this lane, but she sort of, there was Prisoner on Plastic Hearts, and there was, River on ESV and as well as Violet Chemistry. But she seemed to have been she seems to have always been held back a little bit since the mid to later part of her career from going in that direction as fully as I'd love her to. And so that's why this record to me, as much as it has, bits of Plastic Hearts and it definitely has, bits of Dead Pets thrown in there with the experimentation, there's a lot of Can't Be Tamed, which was, I think, her last true unapologetic electro dance record. And so Walk of Fame is very much the sort of grown-up older sister of Liberty Walk, the opener of that iconic 2010 record. Brittany Howard, I believe, also vocalizes in the O's in the intros and periodically, as well as, of course, a male vocalist. Very drag race kind of, singing over the, synths as well. Every time I walk, it's a walk of fame. The cars are bright and lighting up my face. I walk the concrete like it's a stage. I mean, this is definitely a song for Pride Month, for RuPaul's Drag Race. I could see so many Pride shows and so many drag shows going nuts to this one. I love that it's over 6 minutes. You don't actually feel it too much. And even if you do, you just don't want it to end. It's an unrelenting sweaty revelation. And I'm just absolutely in awe of Miley going in this direction. It was not something I was expecting, to be completely honest, particularly on a record like this. Even though when you look at the album cover and how fabulous it is, why is that ever a surprise? The evolutions that this song has too. I mean, it just keeps going and elevating itself. Moving down to Pretend You're God, we slow things down. We get a little bit more lethargic in its delivery. This is a song that if you plucked it right out of Dead Pets, I would have 100% thought it was from that record. This would have fit 100% on Dead Pets. And it might be my least favorite track on the record, I gotta be honest with you. The melody is just absolutely lost in the sauce. It's a bit of like this wailing vocal. It's not pitch perfect. And I know she's not really going for that on this track because of the sort of construction of it. It's an acquired taste and it just doesn't hit for me like I'd like it to. I do appreciate the earnest kind of emotional delivery. I mean, she is worshiping someone, and it's got her down bad. And, I mean, it'll take you into this sort of like, delirious kind of state. And this song exists in that space. It feels a little drugged out. Feels like we might have had a little bit of fun with some psychedelics here on making this one. Because only to those ears would this potentially sound good. But when you're sober, you might be like, it's a little discordant. But we pick right back up into the groove. Every Girl You've Ever Loved. The saxophones. I was not expecting the sax here. This song is, once again, building on Walk of Fame. It's even more polished and fabulous, if you could imagine anything more fabulous than Walk of Fame. Miley is, frustratingly sort of taking on this sort of femme fatale homage of, every girl that this guy could ever be into. And just sort of owning it to try and like seduce him. So Miley is out on the streets and a dog in heat. I mean, that's basically, where she's coming from here. Naomi Campbell provides some of the interlude with that, that dropped pose, dropped in there, that spoken pose. She has the perfect scent. She speaks the perfect French. At times I was like, yeah, is this Miley speaking? It doesn't quite sound like her, but it also sounds a little bit like Miley pretending to sound like a British supermodel. And I'm like, no, I think that's Naomi Campbell, or it's both of them together. But yeah, this song has, as she sings about a flame that's burning with desire, this song is burning bright. It is electrifying. And just soars to levels I just, again, had not really expected this record to do. Then we have Reborn, where Miley decides to go to the Madonna Ray of Light School for spiritual confessions on a dance floor. I mean, I was absolutely gobsmacked by how transcendent of a synth dance track this is. It's hypnotic. It's incessantly rebuilding and reforming itself as it moves through its over 5-minute runtime. And similar to Walk of Fame, is just unrelenting. Miley talks about it being one of her favorite songs that she worked on this record. It had so many evolutions from the 2 years since the initial demo. And I can imagine they just had so much fun, with the tons of producers that she worked with. I mean, this record has quite a few. Sean Everett is on a lot of these tracks, but, a ton of other people coming in here to just craft something absolutely divine. If heaven exists, I've been there before. Kill my ego, let's be reborn. What a powerful mantra to sort of sweat out on the dance as she, lets loose here. And it's true, speaking to, reincarnation and spiritual growth, that, we constantly are going through these phases and cycles. And a night out in the club can have that sort of revelatory experience for someone. But, there's definitely deeper implications to having sort of spiritual enlightenment over trance beats. I mean, it's the kind of song that it's a love song, but it's about something deeper as well. And it's about just sort of owning the sort of spiritual journey that we could all possibly very much well be on, and just sort of celebrating that. And there's a certain kind of enlightened awareness that comes with that. So this is like a revelation. It's just, I think, the best way to describe it. It's hypnotizing. It just keeps you coming back. You don't want it to end. And we finally come down to Give Me Love, where we start to have slightly more of an acoustic kind of, build around the song with slightly less producers here. And we have what sounds like a harp, which is again where the Florence and the Machine illusion comes in, because, there's a lot of great harp backed pop music, that Florence plays with, and it just is right out of her playbook. And we've got perhaps some flute in there, some orchestral elements. She's describing, this place, this Eden, and imagining it. Imagine a place at the dawn of creation, a cityscape we paint in the dark. There's a castle between this obscene blue horizon where golden apples hang in the trees and a bear lady sings. Behind the curtain, heaven awaits. Give me love, give me love, give me love. And then we contrast that with a rather pessimistic outro. So I'll say my goodbyes to the earthly delights while my perfect Eden goes down in flames. I'm eaten alive by the mouth of a monster while fearlessly calling out your name. And although that is such a dark, set of lyrics, she sings it with this sort of euphoric abandon in a hopeful tone, which ends out the record on this rather kind of ecstatic note. It's a blissed out kind of tune that I think just speaks to the mindset that she's in right now. Miley is just wanting to revel in bliss and find love in places maybe that she wasn't open to finding it before. Very much giving in the honeymoon period. This album feels very much like it is living in that space. I know she's now been with this guy for a little while now. I can't remember his name. Is it Max something? I find this extremely interesting reading about it on Genius. Miley talks about this Hieronymus Bosch painting that she found. It was a recreation. It wasn't the real thing. But she went into the painting because it was describing, I think it was an idyllic scene here. And I'm assuming it's the Garden of Earthly Delights painting, the triptych that she's referring to. And she wanted to pluck all the instruments that she saw in the paintings, like the harp and the flute. And I found that very interesting. In that panel, in the 3 panels, it, depicts the fall from Eden into hell. And so Miley was fixated on that sort of idea of like love and lust and sex being what took us there. And so she wanted to play devil's advocate with this song and have these sort of light and dark elements, and just sort of create this, cornucopia of music. That's a very interesting kind of insight into how this song was created. Overall, I do find this record to be a real step forward for Miley. I feel ESV possibly was her sort of, not that there wasn't, there weren't moments of brilliance on that record. Like I said, Violet Chemistry was an amazing synth track. Jaded was an amazing, alt rock power ballad. But I do feel like she was a little bit, she was kind of coasting on, production and style of singing and musical, choices that just weren't pushing her. And so this record is just, I think, much more, aligned with what I think Miley really wants to be making. And she said pretty much as much. And that even more so going forward into the next project, she's probably going to be even thinking less commercial than even this record. And I'm really interested to see what the visuals bring. And so I was almost debating holding off and reviewing this record until I actually saw the film, but I'm not going to be able to see it in theaters. And to be completely honest with you, I'm not sure when this thing is going to be available on either streaming or on YouTube. I mean, I don't know, we're still all really burned by that Renaissance documentary, I think, from Beyonce, right? Why did that never come to streaming services? You really did have to see it in theaters. I guess we all learned our lesson. But yeah, so I don't know when I'm going to be able to. I just wanted to make sure I got my thought outs on this record. I would definitely say my top 2 favorites are 100% Reborn and Walk of Fame. Those 2 songs live together so well, although it's nice having space between them in the track list. You definitely need that dynamic. And then I would also say that More to Lose stands out for me. It's one of those, focal point ballads for me, for Miley, where I just feel all of that emotion. I'm just absolutely in love with the melody choices, absolutely in love with the composition. End of the World as well. I'm always going to be bumping that. Definitely, yeah. Every Girl You Ever Loved. All of these songs. Easy Lover. I just think Pretend You're God is probably the one song I would snip out. It's just not doing as much for me, but in the context of the record, I can understand we do have that experimental sound on Something Beautiful, but I can tolerate it more on that one. I feel like it just needs to be there to sort of like open you up to what this record could be so that your expectations are a little bit adjusted. I mean, it's a real interesting journey that it takes you on. So I'm proud to say that I wasn't sure what to expect with this, project, but I'm proud to say that Miley has delivered, like, so far, one of the best albums of 2025. I mean, I'm very impressed with it, and I've seen a lot of other critics agree. I'm a little disappointed in the Pitchfork review. I think 5.6 is way too low. They criticize her for being a little aimless in the direction of this record. I mean, again, I'm a little bit more of a production girly than I am a lyric girly, and so I think that the melody and production is what really grabs me. But I think that an album about love is just what Miley often does. I mean, the concept doesn't have to tie everything together so perfectly. Even if sometimes the lyrics are a little awkward, I appreciate the quirkiness of it because it's a little bit of a quirky record, and I appreciate that. But they get it right in that this is probably one of her strongest vocal displays. I would agree that her voice is stellar on this project. I mean, her voice has always had, this unique richness to it that might not be for everyone. In some of her live performances, I know people have critiqued her for that. But I think that it really leans well into the types of singing that she embodies on these tracks and the kind of ambiance that she's going for. Let me know in the comments what your favorite songs are for this record, what your overall thoughts are. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Please give this a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe for more album reviews. And I'll see you all in my next one. Thank you all so much for watching. Peace, love, and light. Bye.